Now, tonight on our community finance segment with Muhammad Jaffa and Abdurrahman Hanslow, we unpack a topic a lot of people prefer not to talk about, and that is, of course, the financial impact on your assets after divorce or in the process of divorce. Of course, marriage is not just an emotional and spiritual bond, it's also a legal and financial partnership. The way you structure this partnership, whether though it is in community of property, out of community of property, if there's a prenup or anti-nuptial contract, determines what happens when things fall apart, if they do. We'll explore how different marital regimes shape your financial security, what happens to joint assets like homes, retirement funds, and business interests, and how to plan wisely in the face of course, emotional upheaval. Because at the end of the day, financial literacy is just as important in heartbreak as it is in harmony. Of course, joining me in the studio is Brother Muhammad Jaffa, and joining us from Qatar is, of course, Brother Abdurrahman Hanslow. Assalamu alaikum, gentlemen.
Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I'm looking forward.
Yes, Abdurrahman, we've missed you. We missed you last week.
I feel like
apologies for last week.
Some weeks we get both, and other weeks we get one or two. As long as we have one of you, I am happy, alhamdulillah. But it's always nice to have both.
I think you're lucky this week you have both of us.
Alhamdulillah. I also think it's up to the qadr of Allah. Whatever Allah decides the conversation is supposed to be out. If you both need to be present, then you definitely are. I'm excited for this one simply because a lot of people have been asking for this. A lot of our listeners have been asking what happens. You know, we've been speaking about retirement and two-part savings, but what happens in divorce? Now, it's also a very sensitive topic. A lot of people and a lot of men have been saying amongst the sphere, not just in South Africa, around the world, that divorce tends to destroy their pension. And that's a conversation that I think was good for us to have. And of course, the team, the producers decided that we should have this conversation around that. But I think let's get to the crux of the matter. And Muhammad, you can take the first one. Why is it important to understand what marital regime you are doing before you get married?
Wow. Mikhail, firstly, I think you've given such a wonderful introduction. I think Abdurrahman, the two of us might as well leave because he's covered everything.
I'm not the professional here.
So I think, Mikhail, before we actually, I think let's try and answer, because that question that you've asked is such a wide question. So I think let us first unpack certain things, and then we will slowly break down your question. Okay, so as we know that South Africa has got one of the most comprehensive constitutions in the world.
Yes.
And a very liberal one. Many of us has got certain serious problems with certain rights and certain stipulations in this constitution, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Now, within the constitution, in fact, there are so many changes happening as we speak. And as we know, finally, our marriages are recognized. I'm talking about the Muslim marriages. But let us just cover these certain acts that I want to mention. And then we can go within those acts. What are we talking about? Now, firstly, we get the Marriage Act, the one that we normally know, the Marriage Act, which is the in community or out of community. And that we'll unpack that. Then there is the civil union, and this is the one as Muslims we've got an issue with, because this is for people typically living together, same sex, opposite sex. That's the people that would normally have what we call a civil union.
Yeah.
And then we have where we will fall into is the recognition of customary marriage act. That's where the Muslim marriages, the Hindu, and there's certain customary amongst the indigenous people of South Africa. So those are the three acts that covers the different types of marriages. Then on top of that, because of the challenge, and it was challenged now recently in court, and I don't want to go into the court cases, where the court ruled that the act needs to be changed rather sooner than later. And in the meantime, they have come up with the Maintenance of Surviving Spouses Act.
Yeah.
So the point is, who is declared a spouse? The issue was, and the case went around a couple that lived together for quite a while, And while they were busy planning their marriage, and there was already talk of the lobola that needs to be paid, unfortunately, the husband-to-be died.
Okay.
And when the will was read, it was an intestate, meaning that there was no will. And when the wife to be then challenged this and says, look, they've been living together for a certain time, and then they had dual responsibility, and why is it that she can't claim 50% of the estate as a spouse? And anyway, so the maintenance of surviving spouse then talks about who is a spouse, who qualifies to be a spouse, and this falls both into same-sex and opposite-sex marriages. So you can see it's quite a cocktail of discussions.
Yes.
So I don't know, Abdurrauf, if at this point you want to add anything?
Yes, Mohammed. The one thing we must remember, and there's an old saying that goes, marriage is grand and divorce is about 100 grand. So we have to remember that these pieces of legislation, we might think it's laborious, and we might think that it's been put in place by overzealous public servants. But at the end of the day, it is there to protect. In some circumstances, in most circumstances, it's there to protect. So, but at the end of the day, we have to also realize in the broader picture, it's not only in our culture and our listeners' culture, obviously, there is differences when it comes to the way the government looks at it and the way we look at it. And I think, Mohammed, as the series goes on, there's other things that will be unpacked that will also touch on the Marriage Act and the Intestate Act and various different parts of our lives that will make things a little bit simpler and easier for us as Muslims living in South Africa.
Very well said, Abdurrauf. And just to follow on the point that you've now made, exactly what you've said, Abdurrauf, if it's intestate or testate, the importance of a will can never, ever overemphasized, Mikhail, because if you die without a will, you die what we call intestate.
Intestate, yeah.
And then your assets will be distributed according to the
law.
The law of the...
It's called the Intestate Acts of
correct.
19... I remember because Professor Meneer Abdurrauf, we had him on for a few weeks and we did a series, and it was burnt into my brain. And every time we spoke, I was like, I went home and I just double-checked my will. And I encouraged our listeners, there's also a hadith about this. You have to have your will. And just double-check your will every 3 days. I do mine every 2 days. just because I'm anxious, because you never know. A truck might knock you.
Yeah.
You might... choke on a nachi, something might happen. So you have to be able, and the most important part for Muslims is to make sure that you put at the top of your will that you'd like your will to be done in the form of Sharia. Everything else.
Mikhail, you bring up a very important point there. When we are young and we get married, it's all about love and roses. Yes. And the blossoms and the whatever other flowers are out there. But at the end of the day, that's the time to really sit down and realize what our responsibilities are to our family, and also in the event that anything unforeseen happens, like divorce, which is a reality in society today, that everyone is covered correctly and we are not breaking the laws, number one, of the country, but also the law of our religion. So I think that's vitally important. Death as well is a circumstance that we don't give much thought to until we reach the age of 45, 50 and 60 years old. That's something that we should take cognizance of at a young age, because death comes knocking at any given time.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely, Abdurrauf. And the other point, Mikhail, that you've raised there now, it's the importance of a will.
Yes.
But as I said, in fact, last week at the function, that it is good and well to have a will. It's very important to have a will.
Yes.
But make sure that somebody knows where the will is. Because unfortunately what happens quite often, I don't know if it's just in our society, but the will is almost like a big secret, which I don't understand why.
Oh, yes. I think it's a cultural thing.
So make sure that if the will is drafted, because I've had many a situation where people will come to my office and say, Mohammed, I know there's a will, but I know where it is.
That's a problem.
And exactly. So what's the sense then? So those people who's got families, who's got a will, make sure at least for the bare minimum that your spouse knows or the executors knows where the will. The other thing is also people appoint people in their will as executors, but they never discussed it with the executors. The executors don't know that they've been appointed as executors. Firstly, do they have the skill to act as executors? And do they have the inclination to act as executors? That we will do for another. The duties and the responsibilities of an executor. All those things of how to wind up an estate. I've just written that off, so it's very fresh, so I can still.
Fantastic.
So we will cover all those things. But let's come back to the marital regimes, because I've seen many clients. So when I look at the estates, when I start analyzing the estate, I ask them, especially the not so young people, I ask them, how you married? They look at me dazed. What do you mean, how am I married? We married. I ask them, are you married in community, out of community, Islamic rights? How are you married? Oh, I've still got the old green ID book. And it's in the book. So I said, if it's in the ID book, then it's most probably in community. Or property, what do you mean? So the impact that your marital regime has on your estate it's huge. So let's just unpack that for a second.
Yes.
So if we talk of the Marriage Act of 1961, as you would want to call it, the years out. So there is two there. There is in community and out of community.
Yes.
So if you are married in community of property, it is exactly what it means. That your assets belongs to each other 50-50. Yeah, but it's on his name.
Yeah.
It's on mine. No. Once you are married in community of property,
literally what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine.
Correct. So it's so we need to, I'm not qualified to go into the Sharia aspects of it. I'm only going to state the law and the facts. I think you are fortunate enough to speak to the experts, the Sharia experts, and who better than as a professor now, Abdul Rauf, eh? So alhamdulillah. So you've got
and that's not me, Mohammed. That's only my person. By the way, I thought I'll clear that up now.
Yeah, it was very hard because on Tuesdays I would speak to Brother Abdul Rauf Henslow and then speak to Professor Munir Abdul Rauf. So I was like, at first I was like, this is the same person, but then I realized, of course.
So we've got in the Marriage Act, we've got in community and out of community.
Yes.
If it's in community, it's 50-50. All right?
Yeah.
Out of community is basically what is yours, what is mine is mine. But with out of community, you get also the added on with accrual or without accrual.
Okay.
So let's clarify that. If it is with accrual, so meaning that when you get married, at the time when you get married, both parties will draw up a list of the assets at that point in time. Then anything and everything after that is then with the accrual, meaning it's going to be split 50-50.
Okay.
All right, so at the time of dissolution, then you will bring in the assets that you came in, deduct that, and the balance will be then split 50-50.
Yeah.
All right, I'm not going to go into more detail about that. So that is the out of community of property. Now, it's got further implications, Mikhail. At death, so the one party dies.
Okay.
When the executor does the winding up of the estate of the deceased spouse, he works with the entire estate.
Yeah.
Meaning what is supposedly in your name and what is supposedly in his name, because he or she needs to come to a total value of the estate. So the executor's fees is charged on the entire estate, the deceased and the surviving spouse. So many people don't understand and don't realize that. So your executor's fees is calculated on the entire estate. Whatever the executor needs to deal with is what he's going to charge. I hope that's clear, and I'm asking the listeners that if it's not clear, that they must please message in and let us, so that if we need to clarify it further.
If you do, to the listeners, if you'd like to message in, 0786 10 11 12 is the WhatsApp number.
Okay, so we must also understand that it is not, so there's also implications of estate duty, and so it's executors' fees, estate duty, and capital gains taxes. All these things, the taxes, all is impacted by the way we are married. So people, when they get married, they must make sure that they speak to somebody that can explain to them, as Abdul said, it's all rosy eyes and butterflies, and and then afterwards we sit with the challenges. All right. Then we have the Civil Unions Act of 2006.
2006,
yeah. And that typically is in community of property if there's no antenuptial contract.
Okay.
All right. So the antenuptial contract is where it will say, listen, what is yours, what is mine is mine.
Yeah.
So if there's no antenuptial, the same with the Marriage Act. You also need to have, if you want it out of community, you need to have an antenuptial contract.
Yeah.
So the civil union, if there is no antenuptial contract, it will be in community. But that's more for people who are living together that doesn't want to get married, and they would then draft they would then have a contract, a civil union contract. Then the one that typically is typically for us, and that would be the Muslim and the Hindu customary marriages. And the customary
I think the Jewish also does the customary marriages.
That's correct, yeah. So that would be typically, it will be out of community.
Yeah.
All right. Now, this is the one that more and more, you find more and more young people are now starting to draw up a contract when they get married. And look, many of us come from a traditional home where we feel that, listen, my parents didn't do it, and it's why are we doing that? Because we're planning for a divorce before we even got married.
That's not the case.
Yeah, so it's a very emotional thing, and I think it's important for both parties to approach this in a very adult manner and a very respectful manner.
Yes.
And talk about it, because look, it is a touchy, and sometimes people do feel uncomfortable because we come from a traditional upbringing, and we don't do it like that, and so talk about these things.
Yes, and I must say this, as a young man who's been married for almost 6 years, alhamdulillah, the first thing we spoke about before marriage was this. Right? Are we doing in community? Are we doing out of community? And I told my wife now, who was then my fiance, I said, listen, I don't want to marry you in community or property. I don't want the government to have access to how we manage our marriage. I want to do the customary marriages. Yes, it's recognized, but I want to follow the Islamic way only. And she said, yeah, I can agree with that. And I don't want your surname either. So I said, fantastic. You don't have to take my surname. It's perfectly fine. And we followed the Sunnah. We followed the Islam. And, looking back now, obviously there was this talk at this threw me into what you just mentioned, Muhammad. There was this talk about this forthcoming Single Marriage Act, where they were going to essentially make all marriages under one. I don't know how that's going. So if someone can educate me on that, inshallah, I'd appreciate it. But what I know is that there was a time where they proposed the Single Marriage Act, where all marriages, whether it be customary marriages, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, whatever, it's all under one bracket, and the government will get involved in your marriage. And, certain people won't be able to, certain groups of Muslims can't, allow certain marriages. There was a whole lot of problems. So I said to my wife, this is a problem. And she's like, why do you think it's a problem? And I said, because the reason why Muslims have marriage a certain way and all the other religions have theirs a certain way is because we follow the structure of what the Quran and the Sunnah says. And we try to stick to that. And if the government is going to change our religion, that's a problem. That's a problem. We have to leave this country, I said. So she laughed. She's like, where are we going to go? So I said, to the Middle East. But, that didn't come to fruition. But what I wanted to actually bring up was someone actually messaged in and asked a question around marriage. And I think Muhammad, you can answer this one, inshallah. So I'm going to put the question out to you and then we'll get that to the listener, inshallah. So the listener says, what happens if you are married by Muslim rights and you work? So this is from a woman's perspective. What happens if you're married by Muslim rights and you work and you contribute towards a provident fund by virtue of you earning your own money? Is the husband not entitled to the provident fund except the portion that is allowed to according to Sharia?
Okay, very, 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 very interesting question. So there's this twofold here. At the time of divorce, the spouse can have a claim against your pension, provident, whatever it is. We know that you can, under normal circumstances, you can't draw money from your pension or provident fund until you get to the age of 55 and older. We've covered this for the last couple of weeks. So, but in a case of a divorce, the surviving spouse, not the one spouse can claim from the other spouse's pension fund. So that's according to the law of the country. Now, when we come to retirement or at the time of death, it will then go. Then here's the interesting part: is if it's a fund that is according to the Pension Fund Act, then the trustees would typically identify who the beneficiaries or the dependents were, and will distribute the funds according to who was dependent first on the person and then who the beneficiaries are. So that very much lies in the hands of the trustees of the fund. If it's not subject to the Pension Fund Act, then obviously it will pay out according to what you have stipulated according to Sharia.
No, so, but also, if I can add there,
of course.
Also, in the case of divorce and the pension fund is there, it's also dependent on how your marriage is structured. If you are within community of property or out of community of property. Obviously, out of community of property, there's no claim. Am I right, Mohammed? No claim on the pension fund, whereby in community of property, obviously, there's a shared possibility of the asset.
Yeah, you must understand that there's been so many court cases that you can virtually challenge anything. If the surviving spouse, feels that she's been done in, I've contributed, but in general terms, you are correct. If you are married in community of property, half is his and other half is yours.
Yeah, and I think what we need to talk about before we almost have to close off. What we need to talk about is just break down the fact that having a pre-conversation before getting married and talking about, antenuptial or prenuptial agreements or deciding to not get married in community of property is not an unromantic thing. Because we make marriage to seem as if it is butterflies and roses for the entirety of the time, when in reality, Islam doesn't promote the message that marriage is about love. It's about mercy to the partner and you grow in love with the person. But nowadays, people are getting married because he's pretty, she's pretty, he's handsome, let me get married to them. 5 years down the line, there's a divorce. And I think people have to start looking at marriage from a perspective of can I raise a family with this person? Are they having the conversations before marriage? Because that's what is missing today. I think so. And alhamdulillah, I had that conversation before I got married to my wife. It's what do we want? I sat with our parents and my parents hey, what do we want out of this conversation? What do we want out of this, marriage? Do we want kids? How many kids do we want? Do we want to get married in community of property? Do you want to change your surname? It seems like minor things. It does seem like minor things. But people say, yeah, but that takes away the romance. And I'm like, but romance does die. No one can tell me that they're in love for years. I don't know. Tell me. Maybe I'm crazy. You tell me, Abdurrauf.
Mikhail, you know, you said it so nicely. Speak about it beforehand. I have one better for you. Speak to Muhammad beforehand, because to speak to a financial planner would probably be the best bet. Both of you take your future spouse by the hand, take it to the financial planner, sit in front of them, because this is part of financial planning.
Yes.
This is part of community finance. This is exactly what is being promoted in our show. Yeah. This is community finance, building your finance for the future, safeguarding yourself and safeguarding against any and every circumstance that may arise. And people like Muhammad, certified financial planners, are able, willing and capable and able to put together a perfect plan and the structures in place to safeguard you and your spouse going forward. End of story.
That was beautiful. I agree with that, and I wish I knew about Moja Financial Services before I got married, you know. But it just wasn't meant to be. But I think to our listeners, that is some very good advice from Brother Abdurrauf there. Go see a financial planner before you get married too. It should be part of the conversation, and look at that. Like Brother Muhammad there can give you the advice. Hey, you guys should get married in community or property because of X, Y, and Z, or out or whatever. And they can give advice. They are the professionals. Always leave it to the professionals.
You know, just before time, I think time is going to, there's still the one marriage, customary marriages that we didn't touch on.
Okay.
But now here's where it becomes muddy. and a customary marriage, if it's a monogamous marriage, it's in community.
Okay.
If it's a polygamous marriage, then the first one is in community and the second one is out of community. We leave it at that. It just gets very complicated.
That's very crazy.
The one point that I want to just clarify, and I've got my eye on the clock there, is that particularly when the one spouse is in business, it's vitally important that you make sure that you understand how you're going to get married. Because say for instance now the one party is so you get married in community of property, and the one spouse comes into the marriage with assets inherited and and the other one is in business, carries on business, and something goes wrong in the business. All the assets gets attached. Because you are in community of property. So just make sure that you understand the implications from a business perspective and from a legal perspective and from a separation perspective. Very important. I know some people realized afterwards that, oh my God, I'm running high risk businesses. And we married in community of property. And to correct it at that point in time, you have to literally get divorced. And then the spouse says, but no, wat gaat daar nou aan? Why? Because sometimes they don't understand, you know, is there a reason why you... And so it can be, it's an emotional, it's a touchy topic. So just make sure that you understand all the implications of the different marital regimes.
If I could say my opinion before I let Abdurrauf also close off, I will never ever tell anybody to do anything, but what worked for me was out of community or property. We were just safer. You know, and I think that's important. You know, you have to look what works for you. Some people are fine with it, but like you said, Muhammad, in the more olden days, it was normal. You know, there was no speak about out of community or property didn't exist essentially. And now there are these options where we can talk about how you're getting married. And a lot of, and I say this because my sister's about to get married. I said to her, listen, you know you have options. You know, you and your fiancé have options. Have you spoken about this yet? She's like, no, we haven't. So I said, you can still have his surname, but whatever is his can stay his and whatever is yours can stay yours. But or do you want to amalgamate? She's like, no, we don't want to plan for divorce. And I'm like, that's fine. Then don't. But I always say I plan for death and I plan for divorce and I plan for the worst. That's me. I'm always prepared. Abdurrauf, do you have anything you want to say before we close off?
Yes, you know, as a society, we 300 years old in South Africa, our community. And over that time, we've come a very long way. I mean, in 2022, in June, thanks to the hard work of Judge Essa Musa and Huda Abrams, they brought through the legislation to the Constitutional Court, and it was accepted that the Muslim marriages would be accepted and recognized in South Africa. So that was an historic ruling.
Yes.
So none of us attest to know exactly, be experts on Islamic law, but at the end of the day, we are covered by the law. And we should all take full advantage of what those people fought for, and therefore seek proper financial advice when it comes to these things. And people like Muhammad are probably the best people to speak to when it comes to these matters going forward.
Yeah, no, most definitely.
Then just as a closing remark, Mikhail, that make sure that you understand what marital regime you are going to follow.
Yeah.
And make sure that you understand the pros and cons.
Yes.
Number one. Number two is make sure that you have a will in place and that somebody knows where the will is.
Shukran so much. I think that's a good way to end, the show. But inshallah, next week we'll definitely get more in detail. This was the opening, the opening statements for our segment that we'll be covering around divorce and how it impacts your finances. I like what Brother Abdurrauf said there about pre-marriage conversation with your financial advisor. I think that we should add that to the list. And I think our parents, if your children are getting married, that's something you should add to the list. Have the conversations. I really wish I knew better. I really wish I knew better back then. But of course now things have changed. But alhamdulillah, time has ended, unfortunately. Brother Muhammad Jaffa and Brother Abdurrauf Hanslow, shukran so much for being with us this evening. Appreciate your time. All the best. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Of course, that right there, the voices of Muhammad Jaffa and Abdurrauf Hanslow, and that's Muhammad Jaffa's business is Mojaf Financial Services. And of course, that brings us to the end of that segment. Now, we're going to take a short break for the waqt of Maghrib. The Adhan is at 7:01, and then we'll be back with an international feature we spoke about. That was obviously a very interesting conversation. If you'd like to know more and you'd like to contact Muhammad Jaffa, reach out to us and we'll forward the details, inshallah. Stay tuned to Radio 786 100.4 FM.
More than 800